I was raised in a Christian household, but it was a very sort of casual Christianity. It was just an assumed Christianity. My parents were both Christians. My brother and I were raised as Christians, but there was never a moment where I was sat down and instructed on Christian theology. It was just a part of the world. It was just assumed that that's the way the universe was constructed. You had the earth, and you had the moon, and the sun, and the stars, and the solar system, the trees, and the grass, and the whole chain of life. And in addition to that, as just as natural a part of it as all those other things, you had God and Jesus, and the stories of the Old Testament, which were all true, and the stories of the New Testament, which were even truer somehow. My mother was from a more devout, more overt Christian family. Her father, my maternal grandfather, was a minister in a Protestant church, and so she had a much more overt, much more active Christian upbringing than I had. But our house wasn't like that. It was a much more sort of hands-off version of Christianity. And in fact, it was to the point. It was casual enough that when my maternal grandfather would visit occasionally, he would always insist on saying a prayer with us before he left. We would usually be in the living room, and he would say a prayer in the living room before he would get up and leave. And I always found that strange, because we never did that in my house. We never prayed. We never said grace before eating meals. And except for a few months in 1987, we never attended church. It was not that kind of religious upbringing, but at the same time, it was definitely a religious, a Christian household, and it was definitely a Christian upbringing that I had. There were a lot of things that motivated me to leave behind my religious faith, but I have to say, in my heart of hearts, in my deepest, most sincere thoughts, I never really believed. I mean, like I said, Christianity in my house was just sort of assumed. That's just the way it was. But I never honestly believed. I just couldn't bring myself to believe it. It just seemed, from my childlike perspective, it just seemed too good to be true. And I mean, and now I no longer, as an adult, when I look at Christian teaching, I don't pine for that anymore. I don't think of that as too good to be true. I think it's kind of horrible, and I'm glad that it's not true. But as a child, it seemed like a really nice deal. You're a good person, and you grow up and you die, and you get to go to heaven and live forever with God, who's this great guy who just loves everybody, and you'll have a great life forever, and you never have to worry about death or pain or disease. And those are the bits that they tell you when you're a kid. And it seemed like a great deal, and it just seemed too good to be true. I just always had an inner sense, just this feeling of dread in the pit of my stomach, as soon as I was informed as a very young child that living things die, that I, like everybody else, was going to grow up, I was going to live for a time, and then I was going to die. I just knew that that was going to be it. That there really, as nice as it would be, that there really was no heaven. There wasn't going to be another phase after this life. There wasn't going to be anything else. Because there was no evidence. I mean, even at that young age, I would think, like, well, how do we know any of this? How do we know? Has someone been to the afterlife and come back and told us any of these things? What about all the people with different religions than ours? Are they all wrong and we just happen to be right? Do we have evidence that they don't have? And as I got older, I would explore these questions. I mean, I always had these questions, and I would explore them more directly, and the answers to those questions sort of gradually, very, very, very gradually but steadily pushed me away from any sort of theism toward atheism. And I didn't actually start calling myself an atheist until about really less than 2 years ago. Was when I actually started telling other people, yes, I'm an atheist, and I started speaking out and engaging in the discussion as an atheist on YouTube and on the internet in other ways. But I think deep down I've always been an atheist, and it was just for that reason. I never really believed. I never found any compelling reason to believe, and I tried. I wanted to believe. I don't look forward to death and oblivion. I want to keep existing. And I tried so hard to believe first in the Christian version of heaven and God, and then just in some generic sort of deist version where our souls would survive into some kind of an afterlife, and there was no longer a concept of heaven or hell, but it was just a continued existence of our persons, of our consciousness. And I tried so hard to believe that, and I wanted that to be true so badly. But I never could, because there was never any reason to, because there's no reason to think that any of that is true. I became an outspoken atheist really because it's always been an interesting conversation for me. That's my main motivation. That's why I make YouTube videos about atheist topics and religion. That's why I talk to people that I know about it. That's why it's just such an interesting conversation, and that's really what motivates me. I mean, I honestly do believe that the world would be a better place if people acted rationally more often. That doesn't necessarily mean that they all have to become atheists. But atheism is, I think, essentially a rational position. It's saying we do not believe in this thing that is claimed because there is no evidence underlying it. We're not going to make that unwarranted assumption that there is a God. I think the world would be a better place if there were more people who thought like that. If there were more people who didn't have an unshakable faith to be the foundation for whatever they wanted to do, for their own motivations, their own goals. But that's not the main reason. The main reason is I just think it's fun. And even before I thought of myself as an atheist, when I had rejected organized religion, but I still was clinging to just a general belief in a God of some kind, in an afterlife of some kind. It's just sort of like a form of deism. Although I even sort of bridled at that. I didn't even want to call myself a deist. But I always enjoyed talking to Christians and talking to people of other faiths and engaging about religion, because it's just an interesting conversation. And that's the main reason why I'm here right now talking to you as a member of the A News family. That's the main reason why I have my own YouTube channel where I do a great deal of talking about atheism, is because it's an interesting conversation. And it's fun, and it's enlightening, and it's educational, and it's great mental exercise, and I just enjoy it. That's the reason why I'm an activist atheist, why I'm an outspoken atheist, because I just love it. I enjoy it. I've lived my entire life in small towns in a rural county in Western Maryland. And almost every person I have ever been personally acquainted with has been a person of faith in some shade. Some have been more devout than others, some have been more regular churchgoers than others, but almost all of the people that I have known personally have been people of faith. And most of them have been lovely people. I don't have a negative perception in general of people of faith. I try, when I make atheist videos or address religious topics, to address myself toward the belief, toward the faith, and not the faithful themselves. I mean, my mother is a Christian, and she's also sort of acquired some other non-Christian superstitions as she has grown older, and it's sort of quaint and funny, and also sort of alarming. But lots of some of my favorite people right now are Christians. One of the guys that I work with at Neon Real Entertainment is a Christian and is active in his church, and is a lovely guy and a wonderful guy. And I wish more Christians were like him. He's very open-minded, very willing to talk and to listen, and just a great guy. And my father-in-law is probably not only the most moral person that I know personally, but one of the smartest, possibly the smartest person I know as well. And he is a very devout Christian. He goes to work. He goes to work. He goes to church twice a week, which I think is nuts. Why would anybody do that? But he is so much better than his faith requires him to be. I think that's to me that's the key. Is he claims he's a Christian, and he claims that he lives by the rules of the Bible, and he's following the way of the Bible, but he's really not. He's a lot better than that. And most people of faith that I know and that I'm close with and that I admire would fall into that category for the most part. There are people who use their faith as an excuse for their own bigotry and their own prejudices, and I try to argue against that when I see it and when I can. But it's the faith that I have a problem with, both the specific religion and just the idea of religious faith, of believing in something when you have no reason to believe in it. That's what I have a problem with. That's what I object to, and that's what I try to engage on, not the people themselves. The faithful themselves, by and large, are good people, and I would venture that the ratio of assholes among the religious is only so much greater because they're compelled to that by their faith. People of faith are not my enemy. The faith is my enemy. What advice do I have for people who are considering leaving a religion or a faith? Do it.